Hi, everyone. Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Monday, November 24th, 2025. Larry Johnson will be with us in just a moment on why the 28-point peace plan, whoever drafted it, it's dead on arrival. But first, this. History tells us every market eventually falls. Currencies collapse. And look at where we are now. 38 trillion in national debt. Stocks at record highs defying gravity. So what happens next? Groceries, gas, housing, everything's going up. And this dollar, it buys less every day. When the system breaks, your stocks won't save you and your dollars won't either. But one thing will: gold. I've said it on my show for years. Gold survives collapse. Central bankers know this and billionaires know it. That's why they're buying more. Is it too late to buy or is it just the right time? Call my friends at Lear Capital to find out. Ask questions, get the free information. There's no pressure, and that's why I buy my gold and silver from Lear. And right now, you can get up to $20,000 in bonus metals with a qualified purchase. Call 800-511-4620 or go to LearJudgeNap.com today. Larry Johnson, welcome here, my dear friend. Thanks for accommodating my schedule as always. Do we know who or what authored the 28-point plan?
We know who didn't. Russia. So Russia didn't author it. Apart from that, we've had one version released by a Ukrainian legislator, another version leaked to Axios and the Financial Times. So there are two or three versions out there. It appears that Keith Kellogg may have been one of the people who leaked a version. Again, we don't know what version's what, but if you've read both, at least the two versions I've seen, you still come away with the basic conclusion that this is a document generated by the West that does not take into account Russia's fundamental demands.
Let's start with a couple of specifics. Why would the Russians agree to a Ukrainian military of 600,000 when that is many, exponentially more than what was agreed to in the Istanbul proposal trashed by Biden and Boris Johnson in 2022?
Well, in fact, they would be agreeing to a larger standing army of Ukrainians than existed at the start of the special military operation in February of 2022. Now, again, the number I've seen, one document says 600,000. The Europeans are saying, 800,000. Good luck finding them. Right now, Ukraine cannot keep, an army in the field. They are losing personnel at an accelerating rate every month. They reportedly can only recruit about 17,000, but they're losing between deaths, injuries or wounds from battle or desertions, at least 60,000 a month.
Wow.
So, that means they've got at a minimum a net loss of 43,000 soldiers every month. That's unsustainable.
I'm going through a piece written by our mutual friend Pepe Escobar. He starts the piece by saying he agrees 100% with Larry Johnson's analysis. So I'm assuming you're on the same page, but some of this stuff is crazy. A U.S. mediated Russia-NATO dialogue will be launched to resolve security issues and promote cooperation. Why would Russia engage in a dialogue with NATO over Ukraine mediated by Trump?
Yeah. No, this is what we have here. To quote the old Cool Hand Luke movie, what we have here is a failure to communicate. So on the part of the West and NATO, they've still got some fundamental assumptions about Russia. They assume that Vladimir Putin is desperate to end the war, that the economy in Russia is so bad that they're under pressure. They'll take any deal to stop the pain. That they've lost so many soldiers that it's unsustainable, that they want out. uh, and that the political pressure against Putin is mounting. Now, none of that is true. It's absolutely not true. All of it is fundamentally false. But those are the assumptions of the West. And therefore, the proposals that have come out in these various versions of the peace plan or the framework for discussion carry with it that assumption that Russia is somehow under pressure and the West is inability to apply pressure to end the war. And Russia's standpoint is just the opposite. They're saying, look, we'll be happy to have a negotiated settlement, provided that it meets our demands. And their fundamental demands are the denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, period. And the demilitarization then goes to the extent of getting NATO to back the hell away and take down the weapon systems that are currently in place in Poland and Romania that could potentially carry a nuclear weapon or a nuclear warhead. And Russia said, listen, we're happy. We'll sit down. We'll talk. We'd prefer to talk rather than fight. But that's our, that's where we start from. There's no retreating from those goals. And now it's been added to it is the fact that the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhia are now permanently part of the Russian Federation. Not just a sliver of territory. The entirety of each of those former Ukrainian oblasts is now permanently part of Russia. And Putin doesn't have the power to sit there and say, okay, let's make a deal. Yeah, I'll give you Zaporizhia and Kherson if you give me Donetsk and Luhansk. No, not going to happen. And yet, that's one of the other things, how the West approaches that, we'll freeze this in place. In fact, Kellogg supposedly was pushing a plan that there would be a ceasefire in place and where the Russians are stopped where they are in Donetsk. And then the West builds a wall. I mean, they're going to build a friggin' wall across this vast expanse of territory to separate the Ukrainians from the Russians.
You mean a literal wall, like the Berlin Wall?
Yes.
No wonder Kellogg is gone. This is insane.
Yeah, it's just crazy. Somebody's got a brother-in-law in the concrete business who's going to, hoping to get the contract.
But look, Larry, there's other bizarre things in here. The frozen Russian assets, the U.S. gets to administer $100 billion. Now, Donald Trump's going to participate in this theft of Russian assets in European banks?
Yeah, that's got the Europeans upset because they thought that money was theirs. So, and then you've got the clearinghouse, Euroclear, that holds the money, saying, y'all can't do this because that's going to create some real economic problems for us here in Europe beyond what we already have. So, this is, we're witnessing, really, this is a repeat on a much grander scale of what transpired back in January, February of 2015. The Battle of Debaltseve, which is on the border of Luhansk and Donetsk, that was a significant defeat for the Ukrainian army at that time. It wasn't nearly as big as it was a few years later. And you had the Europeans intervene frantically. Francois Hollande and Angela Merkel of Germany. And then the United States sort of signed on the side. Belarus, President Lukashenko hosted talks, and they signed Minsk II. And the purpose of Minsk II was, from the Russian standpoint, it was going to preserve the language and rights of the Russian speakers in Donetsk and Luhansk to live without being attacked. Well, we then learned, in December 2022, Merkel and Hollande both admit, it was a ruse. We were just trying to buy Ukraine time so it could reconstitute its army. That's all it was. And frankly, that's all this proposed peace deal is. It comes at a time that Russia is wiping the floor with the Ukrainian forces. They are moving and advancing. Russia's moving and advancing all along the line of contact, and you've got major pockets of Ukrainian troops that are trapped. Particularly what's going on in Zaporizhia and Dnipropetrovsk, uh, neither of which up to this point were on Russia's list of we're going to keep this territory, but it's rapidly Russia's going to be in a position, I think, by as soon as the end of December, that they'll be at the Dnieper River and moving through Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia that quickly. And once they're there, particular, they control the river. Or if they get across the river in Kherson, they will then take full control of the Dnieper River. And you control the Dnieper River, that means any product, any grain, anything shipping down from the upper part of Ukraine will be in Russian hands. It literally strangles the economy of Ukraine. So,
do you think that any of this is designed as sort of a deception to get our eyes off of Israel now bombing Lebanon and Trump about to invade Venezuela?
No, I don't think they're that clever. You know, but it does sort of serve that purpose. You know, you remember all the furor and all the attention that surrounded the Anchorage meeting, and
Right.
then, a lot of heavy breathing back then, and then 3 or 4 days later, what meeting? I think that's going to be the result this week. The most likely scenario is that the United States, the Europeans, and Zelensky, they'll come up with a plan that they'll all sort of agree to. I don't see Trump walking away from Ukraine. He should, but I don't see it. So they'll come up with a plan, and they'll present it to Russia. And Russia, their initial reaction will be, "Oh, we'll take it. We'll take a look. Let us read it over." But then once they read it over, they're going to have to set a meeting, and Russia will negotiate each and every point in whatever the U.S. and the West presents. And I don't see the U.S. Or Ukraine agreeing to permit Russia to retain control of Zaporizhia and Kherson. But they're going to. Russia's not going to relent on that. Putin can't. It's not. Let me put it this way. If Putin tried to cut such a deal, I think there would be a move to remove Putin from office.
Wow. Well, here's Putin himself yesterday in military garb on all of this. Chris, number 2.
I think it's clear to everyone that these people, sitting on golden pots, are hardly thinking about the fate of their country, the fate of ordinary Ukrainians, the officer corps, and especially the ordinary soldiers. It doesn't give it to them. But you and I have our own tasks, our own goals. The most important of these, of course, is achieving the goal of the special military operation and solving the problems set before us by our fatherland and the people of Russia. The Russian people are counting on you, hoping for the results the country needs. Let's get to work.
Now, that's a pretty significant statement, is it not?
Yeah.
In military garb to all of his senior generals, broadcast by the Russian foreign ministry around the world. That's a significant statement.
Yeah. Well, and it is customary when Putin goes to visit a military headquarters out in the field that he will wear a military uniform. So that's not unusual. But all I encourage people to do is, if you're having trouble hearing Putin, go to an audiologist, get a hearing test, buy the hearing aids, listen to what he's saying. He's not being clever. He's not using coded words. He's saying very, very clearly, Russia is going to achieve its objectives. It is happy to achieve those objectives diplomatically if possible. But if not, okay, they're going to do it militarily. Russia is under no pressure to end this thing quickly. And you know what? I think from their standpoint, if they continue to drag out the West, to force the West to keep pouring money into this black hole that is Ukraine, great. It's another way to weaken the West. There's nothing in this everything that's happened over the course of the last 47 months now, we have seen every single NATO weapon system, every single one, the ones provided by the United States, Germany, France, they've been defeated or countered by Russia. There's not a single tactic that the West has been able to employ that has caused Russia to permanently lose territory. The early success they had, Ukraine did in September of 2022, was simply because Russia didn't have enough troops in the field to deal with the counteroffensive. But they do now. And there are now reports have emerged that the North Koreans are back. Why? Well, North Koreans get combat experience. This is much better than going to a field training where you're faking it. You're not firing real ammunition, and they're not having to deal with actual drones attacking you. So it's a way for North Korea to get actual combat experience. And Russia's happy to use them, but Russia on its own had still built up its ground forces to around 750,000. And if you recall, back in February of 2022, it was only 250,000. So they've tripled the size of the ground force, and now they're in a position where they're able to actually carry out these operations from north to south. And Ukraine does not have enough bodies to counter all that.
President Zelensky, of course, has a dilemma between ending this voluntarily and losing his job and maybe his life, or separating himself from his biggest patron to this point, the United States. Here he is expressing that dilemma. He also throws something else in here I hadn't thought about. It's November, a very cold winter coming to Ukraine. Chris, number 3.
Зараз один з найважчих моментів нашої історії.
This is one of the most difficult moments in our history. The pressure on Ukraine is now at its most intense. Ukraine may now face a very difficult choice, either the loss of dignity or the risk of losing a key partner, or 28 difficult points, or an extremely harsh winter. The most difficult and further risk are life without freedom, without dignity, without justice, and believing someone who has already attacked us twice.
Sounds to me like he's going to reject this, and probably in his own mind has rejected it already.
Yeah, I think he'll have a change of heart once the whole money issue gets put on the table. While he is under pressure from the neo-Nazis that are behind the power behind the throne in Ukraine, it's Uncle Sam, aka Uncle Sugar, that's providing all the financial lubrication to keep things going, and help pad his bank account. So I think he'll compromise to a point that the United States can have something to offer Russia, because this is a game. They want to be able to go out and blame Russia. See, those Russians, man, they won't take a good deal. But notice how the tone and substance of what Zelensky's saying has changed. You go back a month ago, Russia's losing the war. Ukraine's winning. Russia's losing. Now all of a sudden it's like, oh, this is the most difficult time in our history.
Very, very good point. We don't even hear, Tom Cotton, Ted Cruz, or Lindsey Graham anymore saying Russia's losing.
Yeah. Maybe even Jack Keane is finally starting to see the light.
Well, Jack gets compensated handsomely for what he says.
or buddy, Mr. Divine.
Wow.
Wow. Look, the reality is the reason that this peace plan gets advanced now, it's the same scenario that happened surrounding the defeat of the Ukrainians at Debaltseve back in January of 2022. It's a way for the West to try to use a peace process to buy Ukraine more time, to buy the West more time, so they can figure out how the hell do we beat these Russians. And the answer is you can't.
Who is the de facto Secretary of State of the United States? Is it Marco Rubio? Is it Steve Witkoff? Is it Jared Kushner?
No, I think it's Rubio. I think he's got he has an enormous amount of influence, and he's one of the reasons we still stay engaged in this war. And
He does not want the war to end. He's from correct me if I'm wrong, Larry, or you see this differently. He's from the Victoria Nuland School. We'll use the war as a battering ram, as absurd as this is, with which to drive Vladimir Putin from office.
Yeah, I mean, in his mind, the Russians are still the Soviets who backed the Cubans, that kicked his family out of Cuba, and so he's frozen in the past. But he's not the only voice. I mean, you've got Pete Hegseth as well surrounding him. You got Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury. Trump could easily put an end to this today. You simply pull the plug on the money and the CIA personnel and the military supplies. Pull the plug, cut it off. But he won't do that. So he's like Hamlet, to be or not to be.
Now, Trump claims that the military supplies are being paid for by NATO. How can that be true? Where do those European countries have the money? Surely we're still spending what was put in the Joe Biden pipeline. It was a Republican Congress, and Biden signed it into law.
Yeah, no, they're taking the line, Wimpy from Popeye. They're going to gladly pay us Tuesday for some Patriot missiles today. So it's a paper transaction at this point. I don't think there's been actual money being moved from European accounts into U.S. accounts.
Is there a military gear still coming from the United States to Ukraine?
Nothing that's going to change the war on the ground. There may be able to send a few more ATACMS, maybe a few more Patriots. So what? It's the Russians are advancing at a scale and pace that Ukraine and NATO cannot match, and that's that reality is starting to sink in, and as it sinks in, they get more and more desperate. But at least we saw in that the comment you played by Zelensky, some of the delusional nonsense is slipping away. He's realizing, hey, we're in trouble. This ship is sinking.
When you and Pepe and I were able to interrogate Maria Zakharova last week, I was only there for half an hour. You were there for 2 hours.
Right.
She was being truthful when asked is there some sort of a behind-the-scenes background being negotiated, because this thing had not yet been revealed.
Right.
But wouldn't the FSB have known? Wouldn't somebody in the Russian hierarchy have known? Hey, this guy that went to Stanford that advises President Putin on financial matters and has become buddy with Witkoff, he's in Miami for 3 days.
Yeah. No, the intelligence side of the house in Russia probably had something. Yeah, they report this is what the West is working on. This is what they're cooking up. But there was never any formal presentation of it to the Russians. And in fact, Usharev, another advisor to Putin, it's sort of a counterweight to Kirill Dmitriev, the guy you were referencing. He just came out and said, we've not seen anything. We still haven't seen anything. There's not been any formal contacts. There are no plans about we're going to meet such and such date to start talking about this plan. He says, they're waiting to see what happens in Geneva. And the fact is, it's now 6 p.m. in Geneva. We've not seen any breaking news about some major breakthrough. So I think, you may still have a bit of a food fight going on between the Americans, the Europeans, and with the Europeans backing Zelensky all the way.
Our friend and colleague, Ian Proud, reports that the EU's counter proposal to Rubio keeps the door ajar for Ukraine to join NATO. But if anything is a non-starter, if anything is a misreading of the Russians, it's that.
Yeah. Well, Russia's under no pressure to reach a deal. That's the bottom line. It's like if you're trying to sell a car to somebody that doesn't want to buy a car, that's a tough sell. And in this case, the United States is trying to sell Russia something that is entirely outside of what Russia wants and needs. Russia is winning the battle on the ground, period. And there's nothing that NATO or Ukraine can do to change that situation. But they're going to try.
Right. Larry, thank you very much. We have a very short week. We probably won't get a Intel Community Roundtable in, but maybe Chris can put something together. But if I don't see you, have a great Thanksgiving to you and your family, and we'll certainly see you a week from today and maybe between now and Thursday.
All right, my friend. Take care.
All the best. Thank you. Bye-bye. Coming up at 4 o'clock this afternoon on all of this, why does the United States still not understand the Russian mentality? Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Judge Napolitano for Judging Freedom.